My ex-wife's family tried to manipulate the court into taking my son away because he's autistic, so we fled and started over. But now my ex, who openly hated our son, is back, trying to take him from me too. I think her family is forcing her. My son was 5 years old when he told me for the first time that he wishes he was normal, but he didn't say that because he was feeling off that day. Rather because my brother-in-law Jared told him normal boys didn't cry at fireworks. That moment broke me. Because despite my son being high-functioning autistic and cognitively brilliant, he already knew that he was not good enough for the people around us. My wife left when he was 4 and blamed him. She told him he was defective. And after she left, her family started hovering over us, like a pack of seagulls circling a French fry. First came the unsolicited advice, then the visits. Then Jared, the ex-brother-in-law who once left my son alone at a gas station, by accident, started showing up more. "You've got to toughen him up," Jared said. "He needs to learn to stop whining over stupid things like sound." That same week, he tricked my son into getting into his truck for ice cream, then left him at a playground 3 towns over, and called CPS on me for neglect. It thankfully didn't stick, but it planted a seed in my in-law's head that I was unfit to parent. Soon after, my ex-wife's parents filed for emergency custody, but they didn't use the gas station or the ice cream incident to prove their point. Instead, they used my son's autistic behavior to prove that I was abusive. As an example, they cited that him screaming during a thunderstorm was proof I was abusing him. They also cited that him biting a classmate when his sensory overload hit was proof I was teaching him it's okay to be violent. It didn't matter to them that my son loved me, that he couldn't stop jumping up and down and hugging me every time I came home from work. All that mattered to them was taking him from me. And so, they gathered screenshots, twisted the narratives, and hired a sleazy lawyer who looked like he took pride in getting predators off the hook. All I had was my son and the truth. When trial day came, I knew the courtroom would overwhelm him. So I did what I always did. I prepared him. We read court transcripts, watched old proceedings, practiced with stuffed animals. I explained what custody meant. I showed him how to breathe when it got too loud, and I made sure he knew that I loved him more than anything in this world. In the courtroom, the in-laws sat smug, Jared winking at me like he'd already won. As expected, their attorney painted me as negligent. He said my son needed proper structure. Even fabricated a lie about me laying hands on him. It was a nightmare. When he was finished, the whole courtroom looked at me like I was a monster. I looked over at my son, expecting him to be sad or nervous. But instead, he was mad, like he wasn't about to let someone lie about his dad. He got called on stand, and just like we practiced, he began speaking. But he didn't follow the script. At first, anyway. Instead, he started going off. That man was lying. Never talk about my dad like that again. He never hit me. He loves me. When Mom hit me, he stopped her. I love my dad so much. He never lets my peas touch my mashed potatoes. He puts labels on my bookshelves so I can find every story. He doesn't lie. Ever. The room stilled. "I know Article 3 of the Family Code," my son added. "It says the court wants what is best for me, and what is best for me is staying with my dad." My in-law's lawyer tried to immediately object, but the judge held up a hand. "Let him finish." "Dad doesn't make me feel different like they do," my son said, pointing at Jared. "He makes me feel normal, like I'm actually cool. I love him." I wiped my face. I hadn't cried since my wife left, but that day, I couldn't stop bawling looking at my son. The judge ruled in our favor, full custody to me. No visitation rights were granted to the in-laws. Jared stood up, red-faced. "This is a joke!" The bailiff approached him as he continued to yell. "You'll regret this. You think this ends here?" They were escorted out. But as they passed, my ex-mother-in-law said, "You don't know what you've started." The truth was I didn't. But after winning that initial custody battle, I dared to believe our lives might return to normal for even a little. My son and I slowly rebuilt a structured routine, carefully managing his sensory needs and fostering a stable, nurturing home. Every day felt like a step forward. But beneath that fragile peace, the threat from my ex-wife Maria's family lurked ominously, like a shadow that refused to leave. At first, Jared and my ex-in-laws kept their distance, but their compliance was short-lived. Gradually, they started driving past our house more frequently, their familiar vehicles lingering just long enough to remind us they were watching. I tried to shield my son from their presence, but his anxiety heightened every time he glimpsed Jared's red truck near his school or at the parks we visited. My son's once peaceful routines began fracturing under this calculated intimidation. Then Maria re-entered our lives, tentatively at first, influenced heavily by her parents. Her family manipulated her guilt and vulnerabilities, convincing her she'd failed as a mother and needed to redeem herself by reclaiming custody. Driven by their pressure and eager for their approval, she reluctantly filed a new custody petition. Her parents hired expensive lawyers and experts, meticulously preparing a case designed to exploit my son's autistic behaviors against us. Their harassment became methodical. Jared orchestrated encounters intended to unsettle my son, showing up unexpectedly at stores or playgrounds. Each incident was precisely timed and documented, transforming my son's legitimate anxiety-driven reactions into twisted proof of neglect or emotional harm. Unbeknownst to me, Maria's family also began covertly inciting incidents at my son's school. They encouraged misunderstandings, misrepresented his sensory meltdowns, and gathered witnesses sympathetic to their cause. The more my son struggled publicly, the more ammunition they gained for court. As the custody hearing loomed closer, my sense of foreboding deepened. I worked closely with Dr. Chen, desperate to protect my son from mounting anxiety. But despite our careful preparations, I didn't fully grasp the extent of Maria's family's schemes or realize that my son had begun his own quiet defense. Encouraged by Dr. Chen, he meticulously documented the harassment, gathering his own evidence, determined to safeguard our future. The new custody hearing arrived far too quickly. The morning of the hearing, I woke before my alarm, the room still dark, my heart already racing. I'd barely slept, my mind churning with worst-case scenarios. What if Maria convinced the judge? What if her parents' money bought her better lawyers? What if my son froze up on the stand? I found him already awake, sitting cross-legged on his bed, flipping through his blue notebook. The soft glow of his nightlight cast shadows across his concentrated face as he reviewed his notes. I organized my thoughts, he said, not looking up, by importance. Red stars are the most important facts. I sat beside him, careful not to disturb the precise arrangement of his blanket. The mattress dipped slightly under my weight, and he adjusted his position to maintain balance. That's really smart, buddy. I know, he nodded matter-of-factly. I also packed my backpack, with exactly 7 books, in case we have to wait. My throat tightened. He'd been through this before. The waiting, the tension, the strange adults asking invasive questions. No child should be this prepared for court. We arrived early. Patrick, my attorney, met us in the hallway, his expression grim. His tie was slightly crooked, and I could smell coffee on his breath as he leaned in to speak quietly. They're all here, he warned quietly. Maria, her parents, Jared, and they've brought reinforcements, character witnesses, a child psychologist. My stomach dropped. A psychologist? My son has never even met with their psychologist. Patrick nodded. They're claiming he doesn't need to, that they can assess the situation based on the evidence of emotional distress they've documented. What evidence? I demanded, my voice sharper than intended. A passing court clerk glanced our way, and I lowered my voice. The school incidents. Your son's anxiety. They're framing it as a response to your parenting, not their harassment. I felt sick. They created the problem, and now they were using it against us. Inside the courtroom, Maria sat at the plaintiff's table, looking polished and maternal in a modest blue dress. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, styled in a way that made her look older, more responsible. Beside her sat her parents, and next to them, Jared, who didn't even try to hide his smirk when he saw us. The wooden benches creaked as we took our seats, the sound echoing in the high-ceilinged room. The judge, a stern-looking woman named Judge Patel, called the court to order. The sharp rap of her gavel made my son flinch slightly, his fingers tightening around his notebook. Maria's attorney, a sleek man named Turner, presented their case first. His shoes clicked against the polished floor as he approached the bench, each step deliberate and confident. Your Honor, my client has made mistakes, he began. She left her child during a difficult time. She acknowledges this, but she has spent the last year rebuilding her life, attending parenting classes, and preparing to be the mother her son deserves. I glanced at my son, who was drawing geometric patterns in his notebook, his face unreadable. His pencil moved in precise, measured strokes, creating perfect squares and triangles. Furthermore, Turner continued, we have evidence that the child is suffering emotional distress in his current environment. The father has isolated him, creating an unhealthy dependency. The child exhibits extreme anxiety, has difficulty in social situations, and has regressed developmentally in recent months. My hands clenched into fists under the table. They were using my son's autism against us, framing his natural behaviors as evidence of my failure. Patrick stood next. Your Honor, Mr. Turner's claims are not only false, but deliberately misleading. My client's son was diagnosed with high-functioning autism at age 3. His behaviors are consistent with his diagnosis and have been appropriately managed with therapy and consistent parenting. He presented documentation from Dr. Chen, detailing my son's progress over the years, the strategies we'd implemented, the milestones he'd reached. The papers rustled loudly as he handed them to the clerk. Furthermore, Patrick continued, the recent regression in behavior coincides exactly with the harassment campaign orchestrated by the maternal grandparents and uncle following their failed custody attempt. He presented my documentation, the dates, times, and photographs of their vehicles outside our home, at the school, following us to stores. The images showed Jared's distinctive red truck parked across from our house at odd hours, my ex-father-in-law standing at the edge of the school playground during recess. This isn't about a mother wanting to reconnect with her child, Patrick concluded. This is about control, and the person suffering most is the child they claim to care about. Judge Patel listened intently, occasionally making notes. Her pen scratched against paper, the sound barely audible in the quiet courtroom. When both sides had presented their initial arguments, she turned to my son. Young man, would you like to speak today? She asked gently. My son looked up from his notebook, his eyes darting around the courtroom before settling on the judge. He nodded and walked to the witness stand, his blue notebook clutched against his chest. His shoes made soft padding sounds on the carpet as he approached. I brought notes, he said, his voice small but clear, so I don't forget important things. Judge Patel smiled. That's very responsible. Please, take your time. My son opened his notebook to a page marked with red stars. The paper crinkled as he smoothed it flat with his palm. First fact, my mom left when I was 4 years, 2 months, and 15 days old. She said I was broken. Maria flinched visibly. Her manicured nails dug into her palms, leaving small crescent marks on her skin. Second fact, she never called me. Not on my birthday. Not on Christmas. Not ever. He flipped the page. The sound seemed to echo in the silent courtroom. Third fact, Dad never said bad things about her. He said she wasn't ready to be a mom, that it wasn't my fault. He continued methodically, detailing the recent harassment, the nightmares, the fear he felt when strange cars followed us. He described how Grandpa and Uncle Jared would show up at his school and watch him through the fence during recess. His voice remained steady, but I could see his free hand gripping the edge of the witness stand, knuckles white with tension. It makes my brain feel like it's full of bees, he explained. I can't think. I can't breathe right. I have to hide under my desk. Then he turned to a page with a drawing, a simple sketch of a house with a sun above it. The lines were straight and precise, drawn with a ruler. This is what I want. A quiet house where nobody watches us, where I can read my books and Dad can help me with my science projects and nobody says I'm broken. Maria's attorney stood. Your Honor, while this is very touching, the child has clearly been coached. I don't get coached, my son interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp. I observe. I analyze. I conclude. He tapped his notebook. That's how my brain works. Judge Patel held up a hand to silence Turner. Continue, young man. My son took a deep breath. I could see his chest rise and fall as he steadied himself. Last fact. Yesterday, Uncle Jared came to our house. My head snapped up. What? I hadn't known this. A cold feeling spread through my chest. He thought I was at school, but I had a stomachache, so Dad let me stay home. I was in my room when Uncle Jared came to the back door. He was talking to someone on his phone. He said, "Once we get the kid, we'll make sure he never sees his father again. Maria just needs to play her part for a few more days." The courtroom erupted. Maria's face went pale. Her parents exchanged panicked glances. Jared stood up, pointing at my son. The sudden scrape of his chair against the floor made a harsh sound that echoed through the room. "He's lying! I never—" "Sit down, sir," Judge Patel ordered, her voice like steel. "Young man, are you certain about what you heard?" My son nodded solemnly. "I recorded it." He pulled a small voice recorder from his pocket, the one Dr. Chen had suggested he use to record his thoughts when writing was too difficult. The plastic device looked tiny in his hand. Dad says evidence matters. So I collected evidence. Patrick quickly approached, took the recorder, and handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Patel. She listened to it privately through headphones, her expression darkening. After a tense silence, she removed the headphones. The soft click as she set them down seemed unnaturally loud. "This court will take a 30-minute recess. Counsel for both parties in my chambers. Now." As they filed out, Maria turned to look at me, her eyes wide with what seemed like genuine shock. Had she not known what her brother was planning? Or was she just a better actor than I remembered? The door to the judge's chambers closed with a heavy thud. My son returned to our table, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. His face looked paler than usual, with small beads of sweat at his hairline. "You did amazing," I whispered, pulling him into a gentle side hug, careful not to overwhelm him. "Why didn't you tell me about Jared coming to the house?" "I was collecting data," he replied simply. "Dr. Chen says sometimes you have to observe before you intervene." I couldn't help but smile. My brilliant, methodical son. When court resumed, Judge Patel's expression was grave. The wooden gavel rested heavily in her hand as she called the court back to order. "Based on new evidence and the testimony presented today, I am issuing an immediate and expanded restraining order against Jared Wilson, prohibiting him from coming within 500 feet of this child or his father." She turned to Maria. "Ms. Wilson, this court is deeply troubled by the recording we've heard. While you may not have been directly involved in your brother's apparent plan, your petition for custody appears to be part of a larger scheme orchestrated by your family." Maria's face crumpled. "Your Honor, I didn't know—" "Save it for your testimony," Judge Patel interrupted. "This court will reconvene tomorrow morning to hear final arguments and issue a ruling. In the meantime, I'm ordering a full investigation into the harassment described by the minor and his father." As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I dared to hope we might actually escape this nightmare. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the courthouse windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. That hope was short-lived. As we walked to our car, Maria appeared, hurrying across the parking lot toward us. Her heels clicked rapidly on the asphalt as she approached. I instinctively stepped in front of my son. "Wait," she called. "Please, just 1 minute." Patrick, who was walking with us, moved to intercept her. "My client has a restraining order. Against my family, not me," she said quickly. "Please, I need to explain." I hesitated, then nodded to Patrick. "It's okay. We'll hear her out." My son pressed against my side, his body tense. I kept my hand on his shoulder, reassuring him. I could feel his rapid heartbeat through his thin jacket. Maria stopped a few feet away, her eyes red-rimmed. "I didn't know what they were planning. I swear. They told me they just wanted to help me reconnect with my son, that you'd been keeping him from me." "You left," I reminded her, keeping my voice level. "You called our son broken and walked out. You never called, never wrote." "I know." She looked down. "I was young and selfish and scared. I couldn't handle it. But they made it sound like you turned him against me. That you wouldn't let me see him even if I tried." "Did you ever try?" I asked. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. The wind rustled through nearby trees, filling the awkward silence. "They're obsessed," she continued. "My parents, Jared, they can't stand that you're raising him without them having any control. When the first custody case failed, they came to me, offered to pay for everything if I'd file for custody." My son tugged at my sleeve. "Dad, I want to go home." "In a minute, buddy," I said softly, then turned back to Maria. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I heard the recording. What Jared said." Her voice broke. "They never intended to let me be his mother. They just wanted to use me to get him." I studied her face, trying to determine if this was just another manipulation. "What do you want, Maria?" "I want to withdraw my petition," she said. "And I want to apologize to both of you." She looked at our son, who was half hidden behind me. "I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to be your mom." My son peered around me, his eyes narrowed in assessment. "Are you still scared of me?" he asked bluntly. Maria blinked, taken aback by the directness of the question. "I was never scared of you," she said after a moment. "I was scared of failing you. There's a difference." He considered this, then nodded once. "Okay, apology accepted. Can we go home now, Dad?" I couldn't help but smile at his matter-of-fact response. "Yes, buddy, we can go home." As we turned to leave, Maria called after us. "They won't stop, you know. My parents, Jared, they'll find another way." I looked back at her. "I know. That's why we're leaving." That night, as I tucked my son into bed, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Where are we going to move to?" I sat on the edge of his bed. The mattress creaked softly beneath me, and the bedside lamp cast a warm glow across his worried face. "I'm not sure yet. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere with good schools. Somewhere they can't find us easily." He frowned, processing this. "But what about Ms. Quinn? And Dr. Chen? And my library card has 12 more stamps before I get a free book." My heart ached. Moving meant leaving behind the few stable elements in his life. His teacher who understood him, his therapist who'd helped him navigate his emotions, the routines we'd carefully constructed. We'll find a new teacher, I promised. And a new therapist. And a new library. It might take some time to adjust, but we'll do it together, okay? He didn't look convinced. Can I bring my bookshelf labels? Of course. And my solar system model? Definitely. He thought for a moment. Will they have the right kind of peas? The small ones, not the big mushy ones? I smiled. If they don't, we'll order them online. This seemed to satisfy him. He pulled his blue notebook from under his pillow and wrote something down before closing it. The pencil scratched softly against the paper. What did you write? I asked. A hypothesis, he replied. I think we'll be okay if we stick together. I leaned down and kissed his forehead. That's not a hypothesis, buddy. That's a fact. The next morning we returned to court. The atmosphere was different. Tenser, more subdued. Maria sat alone at her table, her parents and Jared nowhere to be seen. The empty chairs beside her seemed to emphasize her isolation. Judge Patel called the court to order. Before we begin, I've been informed that Ms. Wilson wishes to address the court. Maria stood, her hands trembling slightly. Your Honor, I wish to withdraw my petition for custody. I've realized that my son's best interests are served by remaining with his father, who has provided him with stability, understanding, and unconditional love. Things I failed to give him. Judge Patel raised an eyebrow. Are you making this statement of your own free will, Ms. Wilson? Yes, Your Honor. After hearing my brother's recorded statement yesterday, I realized I was being used as a pawn in my family's vendetta against my ex-husband. I want no part of it. The judge studied her for a moment, then nodded. Petition withdrawn. Now, regarding the expanded restraining order and harassment allegations, what followed was a comprehensive ruling that exceeded even my most optimistic hopes. Judge Patel issued a permanent restraining order against Maria's entire family, including any agents acting on their behalf. She ordered a criminal investigation into Jared's apparent kidnapping plot, and she granted my request to relocate with my son without disclosing our new address. This court finds that the respondents have engaged in a pattern of harassment and manipulation that constitutes a clear threat to the child's well-being, she concluded. The father has demonstrated exemplary parenting under extremely difficult circumstances. He has my full support in taking whatever legal measures necessary to protect his son. As we left the courtroom for the last time, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, vindication, but also sadness. This place had been our home. Despite everything, we'd built a life here. Patrick shook my hand. Congratulations. This is as comprehensive a victory as I've ever seen. Thank you for everything, I said sincerely. Where will you go? He asked. I shook my head. Better if you don't know. Fewer people who know, the safer we'll be. He nodded in understanding. Keep in touch. Let me know if you need anything. In the parking lot, we passed Maria, standing alone by her car. Our eyes met briefly. She gave a small, sad nod. I nodded back. There was nothing left to say. That weekend, we packed our essential belongings. My son approached the task with his usual methodical precision, categorizing his books, carefully wrapping his science models, making lists of what would go in which box. The sound of packing tape being pulled from the roll became the soundtrack of our days. Dad, he called from his room. Can we visit the library one more time? To say goodbye to Ms. Eden? Ms. Eden was the children's librarian who had always set aside new astronomy books for him. She'd been one of the few people who never made him feel different. Of course, buddy. At the library, Ms. Eden fought back tears as my son solemnly handed in his partially stamped card. The card was worn at the edges, with 11 carefully inked stamps in the shape of open books. I need 12 more stamps for a free book, he explained. But we're moving. For safety. Ms. Eden disappeared into the back room and returned with a brand new copy of the Ultimate Space Encyclopedia. The glossy cover gleamed under the library lights. Consider this your free book, she said, handing it to him. You've been my most dedicated reader. My son's eyes widened. But I don't have enough stamps. Some things are more important than stamps, she replied with a smile. Promise me you'll find a good library wherever you go? He nodded seriously. I promise. Libraries are essential repositories of human knowledge. She laughed. That they are. Our last stop was Dr. Chen's office. She'd agreed to meet us on Sunday, her day off, to say goodbye and provide referrals to trusted colleagues in several different cities, so no one would know our actual destination. The familiar smell of her office, a mix of tea and old books, was comforting. Remember what we've practiced, she told my son. When you feel overwhelmed, identify the trigger, implement coping strategy, communicate needs, he recited. She smiled. Exactly. And remember, change is hard for everyone, not just you. It's okay to be scared or angry or sad about moving. He considered this. I'm all of those things, but also curious. About our new home. Dr. Chen looked at me. He's going to be fine. You both are. The morning we left, I woke before dawn. Our packed SUV sat in the driveway, ready for the long drive ahead. The neighborhood was quiet, with only the occasional chirp of early birds breaking the silence. I did one final sweep of the house, checking for anything we might have forgotten. In my son's room, I found a piece of paper taped to the wall, a meticulous drawing of our house with 2 stick figures standing outside. Beneath it, in his careful handwriting, our first home, where Dad taught me I'm not broken. I carefully removed it and placed it in my wallet. The paper crinkled softly as I folded it. My son was already in the car when I came out, his blue notebook open on his lap, a new page titled, Our Adventure. The morning air was cool and damp, with fog lingering between houses. Ready? I asked, sliding into the driver's seat. He looked back at the house, then at me. Ready? Let's go somewhere they can't find us. As we pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a silver sedan or Jared's truck following us. But the street was empty, bathed in the soft light of dawn. We were free. For now. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't truly over. Maria's words echoed in my mind. They won't stop. People like her family, they don't just give up. I knew that all too well, which is why I had one more stop planned before we left town for good. A stop my son didn't know about. A precaution I hoped we'd never need, but one I couldn't afford to skip, because when it came to protecting my son, I wasn't taking any chances. Not anymore. Our last stop was at a small, unmarked office building on the outskirts of town. I told my son we needed to pick up some special travel documents, which wasn't entirely a lie. The building looked ordinary, gray concrete with tinted windows that reflected the morning light. "Wait here for just a minute," I said, leaving him in the car with his new space encyclopedia. "I'll be quick." Inside, a woman with close-cropped gray hair and sharp eyes greeted me. This was Diane, a former police detective turned private security consultant. Patrick had connected us. Her office smelled of coffee and paper, with filing cabinets lining the walls. "Everything's ready," she said, handing me a sealed envelope. "New driver's license, social security card, bank accounts. The works. Your new identity is as solid as I can make it. Background, credit history, employment records. Your son's school records have been transferred under the new name." I nodded, my throat tight. "And the monitoring? Already set up. We'll track any searches for your old names, any unusual activity around your previous contacts. If they start getting close, you'll know before they do." Back in the car, my son barely looked up from his book. The pages rustled as he turned them, absorbed in images of distant galaxies. "Did you get the documents?" he asked without looking up. "All set," I said, tucking the envelope into my jacket. "Ready for our big adventure?" He nodded, but his eyes lingered on the town passing by outside his window. Buildings and landmarks we'd known for years slipped past, growing smaller in the side mirror. "I calculated that we've lived in this house for 2,347 days, he said quietly. "That's a lot of days." "It is," I agreed, "but we'll have even more days in our new home. Will it have a backyard? For my telescope?" "Even better," I promised. "It has a deck on the roof, perfect for stargazing." That seemed to cheer him up. As we merged onto the highway, I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. The farther we got from our old life, the safer we'd be. We drove for hours, stopping only for bathroom breaks and to stretch our legs. My son documented everything in his blue notebook. The license plates we saw from different states, the types of clouds in the sky, the exact mileage between rest stops. The scratching of his pencil became a comforting background noise to the hum of the engine. "Dad," he said somewhere around hour 6, "are we going to change our names? Like in the witness protection shows?" I nearly swerved. "Have you been watching those shows again?" He shrugged. "Sometimes when you're making dinner. They're interesting. Very procedural." I sighed. No point in lying. He'd figure it out soon enough. "Yes, we are changing our names. Just our last name, not our first names. It's to make it harder for certain people to find us." He considered this. "Like Grandpa and Uncle Jared?" "Exactly like them." "Good." He went back to his notebook, adding something to a list. "I've been thinking about last names. I like Chen, like Doctor. Chen. Or Quinn, like Ms. Quinn. Or maybe something space-related, like Armstrong or Hubble." I smiled. "The new name is already picked out, buddy, but I like your suggestions." "What is it?" he asked eagerly. "Walker," I said. "We're going to be the Walkers." He tested it out. "Walker. Walker." Then he nodded. "It sounds like we're always moving. That's good for hiding." "Exactly," I agreed, relieved he liked it. We reached our destination late that night. A small city in another state, far enough away to feel safe, but not so remote that we'd stand out as newcomers. I'd rented a furnished apartment as a temporary base while we looked for a permanent home. The apartment was small but clean, with 2 bedrooms and, as promised, roof access. The building was older, with creaking floors and radiators that clanked, but it felt secure. My son immediately claimed the smaller bedroom, which had built-in bookshelves. He ran his fingers along the empty shelves, already planning his book arrangement. "This is acceptable," he declared after a thorough inspection. "The shelves need labels, though." "We'll get on that tomorrow," I promised, exhaustion hitting me like a wave. "For now, let's just get some sleep." That first night in our new place, I barely slept. Every unfamiliar sound jolted me awake. The hum of the refrigerator, the creaking of the heating system, the distant sirens of a city I didn't know yet. The shadows on the walls seemed to shift and move in the unfamiliar darkness. I kept checking my phone, half expecting to see a message from Diane warning me that they'd somehow tracked us already. But morning came without incident. And then another. And another. We settled into a routine. I found a job working remotely as a technical writer, flexible hours that allowed me to be there for my son. We found a new therapist, Dr. Ramirez, who specialized in autism and trauma. The local school had a good special education program with teachers trained to handle sensory issues. Slowly, cautiously, we began to build a life. My son adapted better than I'd expected. He mapped out the new neighborhood with meticulous precision, identifying the optimal routes to the library, the park, the science museum. He created detailed charts of traffic patterns and noise levels at different times of day. He made a friend, a quiet girl named Zoe who shared his interest in astronomy and didn't mind his need for precise language. "Zoe says I talk like a professor," he told me one evening, sounding pleased. "She says it's cool." "It is cool," I agreed. "You're cool." He rolled his eyes, but I caught the small smile. 3 months into our new life, I received the first alert from Diane. Jared had been making inquiries about us in our old town, questioning my former colleagues, my son's old classmates' parents, but the trail was cold. We'd been careful to leave no forwarding address, no hints about our destination. A month later, another alert. Maria's parents had hired a private investigator. The PI had tracked us as far as the state line before losing the trail. Each alert sent my anxiety spiraling, but each time, our precautions held. Our new identities remained secure. We were ghosts to them now. 6 months after our move, we found a permanent home. A small house with a fenced backyard, and as promised, a rooftop deck perfect for stargazing. The house needed work, peeling paint, outdated kitchen, squeaky floorboards, but it was ours. A fresh start. The day we moved in, my son carefully arranged his books on the built-in shelves, applying new labels with his precise handwriting. Each book had its exact place, organized by subject and then alphabetically. "Dad," he said that night as we sat on the roof, his telescope pointed at Jupiter. I think our hypothesis was correct. Which hypothesis is that? I asked, watching as he adjusted the focus knob with practiced fingers. That we'd be okay if we stuck together. He adjusted the focus on his telescope. The evidence supports it. I smiled. I think you're right. Life wasn't perfect. My son still had meltdowns sometimes, like when the school fire alarm went off unexpectedly during a test, or when the grocery store rearranged the cereal aisle. He still had nightmares about being taken away. I still woke up sometimes in a cold sweat, convinced I'd heard Jared's truck in the driveway. But those moments became less frequent. The good days outnumbered the bad. A year after our move, I received a message from Patrick. Jared had been arrested, not for anything related to us, but for fraud. He'd been running some kind of investment scam, and one of his victims had pressed charges. He was facing serious jail time. One less thing to worry about, Patrick wrote. Thought you'd want to know. I didn't share this news with my son. I didn't want to reopen old wounds. But I slept a little easier that night. 2 years into our new life, we received an unexpected package forwarded through Patrick's office. The only person who knew our new address. Inside was a letter from Maria. I read it alone first, bracing for threats or demands. The paper was expensive, with a faint scent of the perfume she used to wear. Instead, I found an apology. Longer, more detailed, and seemingly more sincere than the one she'd offered in the courthouse parking lot. She wrote about getting therapy, about confronting her parents about their manipulation, about the guilt she carried for abandoning her son. She didn't ask to see him, or even to know where we were. She just wanted us to know she was sorry, truly sorry, and that she hoped we were happy and safe. Enclosed with the letter was a small blue box containing a meteorite fragment, a genuine piece of space rock with authentication papers. I remembered he loved space, she wrote. Maybe someday he'll want this. If not, I understand. I debated whether to show any of this to my son. He was doing so well, thriving in school, making friends, pursuing his interests with the same intensity but less anxiety. Why risk disrupting that? But he deserved to make his own choices about his relationship with his mother, limited as it might be. That evening, I showed him the letter and the meteorite. He read the letter carefully, his expression unreadable. Then he examined the meteorite, turning it over in his hands. The rock was dark and dense, with subtle patterns visible on its surface. It's a chondrite, he said finally. Probably from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Very old. Billions of years. What do you want to do with it? I asked. He thought for a moment. I want to keep it. For my collection. He placed it carefully on his desk, next to his other space treasures. But I don't want to write back. Not yet. That's completely fine, I assured him. You don't have to decide anything now. He nodded, then asked, Is she still with Grandpa and Uncle Jared? No, I said truthfully. She says she isn't speaking to them anymore. Good. He went back to the homework he'd been doing. Maybe someday I'll write to her, when I'm older, to ask questions about space rocks. Whenever you're ready, I said. No rush. 3 years after our escape, we received word that my ex-father-in-law had passed away. The news came again through Patrick, who'd maintained a distant eye on the family for us. The email was brief, but contained all the essential information. Heart attack, he reported. The grandmother has moved to a retirement community in Florida. Jared is still in prison. Maria is living in another state, working as a teacher's aide. The threat that had loomed over us for so long was finally, truly, gone. That night, I found my son sitting on the roof deck, his telescope aimed at the stars, his blue notebook open beside him. The night was clear and cool, with stars scattered across the dark sky like diamonds. Dad, he said without looking away from the eyepiece. I've been thinking about our old house. I sat down next to him. What about it? I can't remember what it looked like anymore. Not exactly. He sounded troubled by this. I try to picture it, but the details are fuzzy. That happens, I said gently. Memories fade. He turned to look at me, but I don't want to forget everything. Some things are important to remember. I reached into my wallet and pulled out the drawing he'd made the day we left. The picture of our old house with the 2 stick figures and the words, Our First Home, where Dad taught me I'm not broken. The paper was creased from being folded, but the drawing was still clear. His eyes widened. You kept it? Of course I did. I handed it to him. Some things are worth remembering. He studied the drawing, tracing the lines with his finger. Can we put this in a frame? For my room? Absolutely. He carefully placed the drawing in his notebook, then went back to his telescope. After a moment, he said, I'm glad we moved here. Me too, buddy. Even though it was scary at first. Even though we had to change our names and leave everything behind. He adjusted the focus on his telescope. It was worth it. I looked up at the vast expanse of stars above us. The same stars we'd looked at from our old backyard, but somehow brighter here, clearer. It was definitely worth it. Later that night, as I was tucking him in, a ritual he claimed to be too old for but still seemed to enjoy, he asked, Dad, do you think we'll ever have to run away again? I shook my head. No, buddy. We're safe now. This is our home. Good, he said, pulling his blanket up to his chin. Because I like it here. I like being a walker. Me too, I said, smiling. As I turned to leave, he said, Dad, one more thing. What's that? Thank you for not giving up, for fighting for us. My throat tightened. Always, buddy. Always. 5 years after fleeing our old life, we celebrated with a camping trip to a dark sky preserve, a place with no light pollution where the stars shone with incredible clarity. My son, now 10, set up his telescope with practiced ease, consulting his star charts and making notes in the latest version of his blue notebook. As we sat by the campfire that night, he suddenly asked, Do you ever miss our old life? I considered the question. I miss some things, some people, but I don't miss the fear. He nodded thoughtfully. I used to be afraid all the time. I didn't even realize it until we moved and I stopped feeling that way. And how do you feel now? I asked. He looked up at the stars, his face illuminated by the firelight. Safe, he said simply. And not broken. Never broken. I put my arm around his shoulders. And for once, he didn't pull away. That's all I ever wanted for you. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the embers of the fire dance like distant stars. The past couldn't touch us anymore. We'd outrun it, outlasted it, outgrown it. We were the walkers now, and we were home.